The gun was already pressed against her temple when Ava realized she'd climbed into the wrong car. Blood pooled on the leather seat between them. The man beside her, dark suit torn, face carved from marble and menace, should have been calling 911. Instead, he was smiling. "Drive," he whispered, his voice like gravel and smoke, "or we both die tonight." Outside, sirens screamed through the storm. Inside, Ava's hands found the wheel, her nursing instincts battling her survival instincts. She didn't know his name yet. Didn't know she'd just become the only witness to a war she couldn't escape. This is the story of how I stopped being the good girl and started being the queen. If you're watching from anywhere in this wild world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's dive in together. The rain came down like divine punishment that night, hammering the cracked pavement outside Seattle Grace Medical Center with enough force to drown out everything else. The distant wail of ambulances, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the sound of Ava Bennett's heart breaking for what she thought was the last time. She stood under the flickering emergency room overhang, her scrubs soaked through despite the thin protection above, watching the taillights of her husband's truck disappear into the storm. Michael hadn't even slowed down when he told her to get out. Hadn't looked back when she stumbled onto the curb, her bag spilling across the sidewalk, her phone cracking against concrete already slick with rain and oil. "Happy anniversary," she whispered to no one, her voice stolen by thunder. 12 hours into a double shift, 12 years into a marriage that had somehow calcified into something unrecognizable. 12 minutes ago, she'd still believed they could fix it. The argument had been vicious and quick, erupting the moment she'd climbed into his truck after her shift. He'd been drinking. She could smell it, that sweet poison that turned her gentle husband into someone with edges sharp enough to cut. She'd asked him about the second mortgage he'd taken out without telling her. He'd called her a controlling bitch who didn't understand what it took to keep them afloat. "You want to know where the money went?" he'd snarled, yanking the wheel hard enough to make her grab the door. "You want to fucking know? Maybe if you weren't working every goddamn hour of every goddamn day, I wouldn't have to..." "Wouldn't have to what?" She'd pushed back for once, tired beyond exhaustion, past the point where she could keep swallowing everything for the sake of peace. "Gamble it away? Drink it away?" "What, Michael? What wouldn't you have to do?" That's when he'd pulled over and told her to walk. She'd thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. Now Ava was alone in a city that felt like it was melting into the ocean. Her phone dead, her pride in tatters, her feet already aching in shoes that had logged 15 miles across hospital floors that day. The bus stop was 6 blocks away. Home was another 40 minutes after that, assuming the storm hadn't knocked out service. She bent down, gathering her scattered belongings with trembling fingers. Chapstick, loose change, a photo ID badge with her face smiling back at her like a stranger's. Ava Bennett, RN, pediatrics. She looked younger in the picture, taken 3 years ago when she still believed that caring for others would somehow fill the emptiness at home. "Stupid," she muttered, shoving everything back into her bag. "So stupid." A car turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. For a moment, a foolish, desperate moment, she thought Michael had come back, that he'd realized what he'd done, realized who she was, remembered the woman he'd promised to love when they were both still soft and hopeful. But it wasn't Michael's battered pickup. It was a black Mercedes, sleek and predatory, moving too fast for the conditions. It hydroplaned slightly as it turned, back end sliding before the driver corrected with expert precision. The car slowed as it approached, and Ava stepped back automatically, pulling her bag closer. The passenger window lowered with a mechanical whisper. "Need a ride?" The voice was wrong, too rough, too controlled, belonging to someone who didn't ask questions out of kindness, but strategy. Ava squinted through the rain, trying to see the driver, but the interior was dark except for the blue glow of the dashboard. "No thank you," she said, loud enough to be heard over the storm. "I'm fine." "You're soaked and stranded outside a hospital at midnight." The voice held something like amusement. "That's not fine. That's the setup for a horror movie." Despite everything, Ava almost smiled. "Exactly why I'm not getting in a stranger's car." "Fair enough." There was a pause, filled with thunder and the drum of rain on metal. "But I'm bleeding, and you're a nurse, and there aren't any other options on this street tonight. So maybe we help each other." Ava's professional instincts, beaten into her by years of training and duty, warred with every self-preservation lesson she'd ever learned. She took a step closer, close enough to peer through the window. What she saw made her breath catch. The man in the driver's seat was bleeding, not the dramatic spray of a severed artery, but the steady seep of something serious. His left hand was pressed against his right shoulder, and even in the darkness, she could see the dark stain spreading across his white shirt, black suit jacket, discarded in the passenger seat. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, like something carved by an artist with a grudge against softness. Dark hair, dark eyes that tracked her with predatory awareness, and a mouth set in a line that suggested he'd forgotten how to smile honestly sometime before she was born. He was, Ava realized with a strange detachment, absolutely beautiful in the way that poisonous things often are. "How long ago?" she asked, her training overriding her fear. "The wound." 20 minutes, maybe 30? He tilted his head slightly, studying her with the same intensity she was studying him. "I can keep pressure on it, but I need it cleaned and closed, unless you want me to bleed out on your conscience. Hospitals exist for exactly this reason. Hospitals ask questions." Something dark crossed his face. "I can't afford questions tonight." Every alarm bell in Ava's head was screaming at her to walk away. This was how women ended up on true crime podcasts. This was how nurses became cautionary tales. But she also knew what a gunshot wound looked like, had seen enough of them roll through Seattle Grace's emergency room to recognize the distinct damage pattern even from a distance. This man had been shot recently, and he was sitting in a $200,000 car, bleeding through designer clothes, asking her to break every protocol she'd ever learned. "What's your name?" she asked. The corners of his mouth twitched. "Does it matter?" "If I'm going to help you, yes." "Dante." He paused. "Dante Russo." The name meant nothing to her. Should it have? Something in the way he said it suggested it should, like he was testing whether she recognized him, but Ava had spent the last decade with her head buried in patient charts and textbooks. She didn't follow the news, didn't have time for local crime reports or society pages or whatever world might contain men who wore suits worth more than her annual salary. "Ava," she said finally. "Ava Bennett." "Well, Ava Bennett." Dante shifted slightly, and she caught the flash of pain that crossed his face before he locked it down. "Are you going to save my life, or are we going to keep having this philosophical debate while I ruin my upholstery?" She made her decision in the space between one breath and the next, the same way she made every impossible decision in the ER, by ignoring the voice that told her to protect herself and listening instead to the one that said, "Someone needs help." It was going to get her killed one day. Maybe today. Ava opened the door and climbed in. The interior of the Mercedes smelled like leather and copper, luxury and blood. Ava's wet clothes immediately started soaking into the seat, but Dante didn't seem to care. He was already shifting the car into gear, pulling back onto the road with one hand while keeping pressure on his wound with the other. "Where are we going?" Ava asked, her fingers automatically reaching for the seatbelt. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." He took a corner too fast, and Ava grabbed the door handle. "How bad is it, professionally speaking?" She leaned over, trying to assess the wound without disturbing his hand. Blood had soaked through his shirt and was starting to pool in the creases of his palm. The placement was high on the shoulder, could be a through and through, or the bullet could still be lodged near the joint. Either way, it needed proper care. "You need a hospital," she said flatly. "Real equipment, antibiotics, probably surgery depending on the trajectory. Not an option. Then you need someone who does this kind of work off the books." She sat back, something cold settling in her stomach. "I'm a pediatric nurse. I deal with ear infections and scraped knees, not gunshot wounds." "But you know how to clean a wound, suture, stop infection." Dante glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the streetlights they passed like a cat's. "That's all I need. Patch me up enough to last a few days and I'll handle the rest." "A few days? This needs—" "I know what it needs." His voice went hard. "But I also know what I can and can't do right now, and walking into an ER with a bullet wound is a death sentence. Not from the injury, from the people who put it there." Ava processed that information slowly. The expensive car, the gunshot wound, the refusal to involve authorities. She wasn't naive. She understood that she'd just climbed into a vehicle with someone on the wrong side of several laws. "I should get out," she said quietly. Probably. But he didn't stop the car, and she didn't reach for the door handle. Instead, they drove in silence through streets turned into rivers, past buildings that looked like ghost ships in the storm, deeper into a part of the city Ava had only seen from the freeway. The hospitals and medical centers gave way to warehouses and industrial complexes, then suddenly to estates hidden behind walls and gates, houses that whispered old money and older secrets. Dante turned into a driveway that seemed to materialize out of the darkness, triggering a gate that opened without him touching anything. The house beyond was massive, 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within like a fortress pretending to be a home. "You live here?" Ava asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "Sometimes." He parked in a garage that held 2 other cars, both as expensive as the Mercedes. Depends on who's asking and why. He killed the engine, and for a moment they sat in silence, broken only by the rain drumming on the roof. Dante's breathing had gone shallow, each inhale slightly too controlled. He was fading, not dramatically, but steadily, the way people did when they'd lost more blood than they wanted to admit. "Come on," Ava said, making another impossible decision. "Let's get you inside before you pass out and I have to drag your body across the garage." His laugh was rough, but genuine. "You're not what I expected." "Yeah?" She climbed out of the car, her wet shoes squeaking on polished concrete. "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd run." Dante pushed his door open with his good shoulder, moving carefully as he stood. "Someone who'd make this harder." Still time for that. But she was already moving around the car to support his injured side, her nursing instincts overriding every bit of common sense she had left. He was taller than she'd realized, had to be 6'3" or 6'4", and built like someone who'd spent serious time either in a gym or doing manual labor. The weight of him against her was solid and warm despite the blood loss. They made it into the house through a door that led directly from the garage into a kitchen that looked like something out of an architecture magazine. Marble counters, state-of-the-art appliances, pendant lights that Dante flicked on with his elbow. Everything gleamed, unused, sterile in the way of showrooms and spaces where people didn't actually live. "Dining room," Dante said, nodding toward an archway. "Table's better than the couch for this." Ava helped him through, cataloging details automatically. The artwork on the walls that she suspected was original, the lack of personal photographs, the security panel by the front door that glowed red and threatening. This was a house built for display and defense, not comfort. The dining table was a slab of dark wood that could seat 12. Dante sank into one of the chairs with a controlled exhale, finally releasing his grip on the wound. Fresh blood immediately soaked through his shirt. "Do you have supplies?" Ava asked, shifting into the clinical detachment that had gotten her through countless emergencies. "Gauze, antiseptic, surgical thread. Bathroom upstairs, second door on the left. Everything's in the cabinet under the sink." Of course it was. Of course this man kept a fully stocked medical kit in his bathroom like some people kept extra toothbrushes. Ava didn't let herself think about what that meant. She just climbed the stairs, found the bathroom, all black marble and chrome, magazine perfect and soulless, and opened the cabinet. What she found made her stomach drop. This wasn't a first aid kit. This was a trauma center's crash cart shrunk down to essentials. Lidocaine, surgical scissors, sterile suture kits in multiple sizes, broad-spectrum antibiotics, hemostatic gauze, even a quick clot sponge still sealed in its package. Someone had assembled this collection with expertise and intention, someone who expected to need it. She grabbed what she'd require, loaded everything into a small bin she found under the sink, and carried it back downstairs. Her hands were steady. They always were when she worked, but her mind was racing through implications she didn't want to examine. Dante had shed his ruined shirt by the time she returned, and Ava had to force herself to focus on the wound and not the rest of him. He was tattooed, intricate work that covered his left ribs and disappeared beneath the waistband of his pants. The ink told a story she didn't know how to read, all thorns and wings and words in a language she didn't recognize. "Entry wound," she said, circling to examine his back. "No exit. Bullet's still in there." "Can you get it out?" "Not safely. Not without proper imaging and instruments." She set the supplies on the table, her professional mask firmly in place. "Best I can do is clean it, pack it with hemostatic gauze, and close the entry wound. You'll need a doctor, a real one, within 48 hours or you'll risk serious infection. Understood. Dante's eyes tracked her movements as she laid everything out with the precision of an OR nurse. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Not gunshot wounds, Ava admitted, uncapping the antiseptic. But I've cleaned plenty of traumatic injuries, knife wounds, glass, metal. The principle's the same. Remove debris, stop infection, promote healing. She paused, meeting his gaze directly. This is going to hurt. A lot. I have lidocaine, but given the blood loss, I don't know how you'll react to it. Skip it. Dante's jaw tightened. I felt worse. Ava didn't ask what could be worse than digging around in a bullet wound without anesthetic. She just pulled on the nitrile gloves she'd found in the kit and got to work. To his credit, Dante didn't scream, didn't even flinch, at least not until she had to probe deeper than she'd hoped, feeling for the bullet with gloved fingers while his muscles locked rigid beneath her touch. His breathing went ragged, but he stayed absolutely still, hands gripping the arms of the chair hard enough to make the wood creak. Found it, Ava murmured. It's lodged against the scapula. That's actually good news. Probably stopped it from hitting anything vital. Feels vital. Pain means you're alive. She worked quickly now, packing the wound with hemostatic gauze to encourage clotting, then flushing everything with antiseptic that made Dante hiss through his teeth. The whole process took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Her focus narrowed to skin and blood and the steady work of her hands. Finally, she stepped back, surveying her work. It wasn't pretty. Field medicine never was. But it was clean and properly dressed, the bleeding reduced to a manageable seep. Done, she said, stripping off the gloves. Change the dressing twice a day. Watch for signs of infection, redness, excessive swelling, fever, red streaks extending from the wound. If you see any of that, you need antibiotics immediately. Yes, ma'am. There was something like respect in Dante's voice now, under the pain. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still might die of sepsis. Always the optimist. Ava started cleaning up the supplies, her hands moving automatically while her mind finally caught up with what she'd just done. She'd just performed emergency medical care on a gunshot victim without reporting it, had technically aided someone who was likely involved in criminal activity, had crossed every ethical line in her profession, and she didn't regret it, not yet anyway. So, Dante said, watching her work with those unnervingly sharp eyes, who leaves a pediatric nurse stranded in a thunderstorm? Ava's hand stilled. That's none of your business. You got into my car, patched up a bullet wound without asking questions. I'd say we're past the none of your business stage. You needed help. And you needed a ride. He shifted slightly, testing the range of motion in his injured shoulder. But there's more to it than that. I've seen enough desperate people to recognize the look. Who hurt you? The question was too direct, too accurate. Ava felt something crack in her chest, all the careful control she'd maintained throughout the day suddenly fracturing. My husband, she said quietly. My husband left me on the side of the road in a storm after I caught him taking out a second mortgage without telling me. Husband. Dante's expression darkened. Let me guess, gambler? Ava's head snapped up. How did you... I know the type. Second mortgage is usually a desperate move to cover debts. His voice went flat, dangerous. Your husband have a favorite casino, sports book, cards? I don't know. The admission felt like failure. I've been working double shifts for months. I thought we needed the money for bills, for the house, but if he took out another loan... The implications crashed over her like the storm outside. Michael had been hiding things, had been lying about where money was going, about why they were always barely scraping by despite her salary. She'd thought he was depressed, struggling with unemployment, drinking to cope with the stress of their failing marriage. But what if it was worse than that? What's his name? Dante asked. Why? Because if he's gambling in this city, he's gambling with people I know. And if he's in deep enough to take out a second mortgage, he's probably in over his head. Dante leaned forward slightly, ignoring the fresh blood that seeped through his bandage. What's his name? Michael Bennett. The words tasted like poison. But you don't need to... Do you know where he goes? Who he owes? No, I told you, I don't. I didn't know about any of this until tonight. Dante studied her for a long moment, something calculating moving behind his eyes. Then he stood, moving carefully, and pulled out his phone. His fingers flew across the screen for several seconds before he set it aside and looked at her again. You should stay here tonight, he said. Storm's getting worse, and you're in no shape to go home. I need to go home. But even as she said it, Ava wasn't sure she believed it. Home to what? To Michael, drunk and angry? To an empty house and empty promises? To the ruins of a marriage she'd been trying to save for years? Your husband owes money to the Calabrese family, Dante said quietly. A lot of money. Enough that when he can't pay, they'll come looking for collateral. The blood drained from Ava's face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about organized crime, real organized crime, not the movie version. Your husband has been gambling at an underground card room in Belltown for 18 months. Started small, won a little, got hooked, then he started losing. And when you lose to people like the Calabreses, they don't just take your car or your house. They take everything. Ava sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Why would you know that? Dante's smile was sharp enough to cut. Because, Ava Bennett, I'm the only thing standing between the Calabrese family and complete control of this city's criminal enterprises. They're my competitors, my enemies. And right now, through absolutely no fault of your own, you're caught in the middle. The room tilted. Or maybe Ava did. She couldn't tell anymore. I need to go home, she whispered again, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. If you go home tonight, you'll be dead by morning. Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, delivering a death sentence like a weather report. Or worse, they'll take you to make your husband pay faster. Is that what you want? This isn't real. Ava stood on shaking legs. This is insane. I'm a nurse. I work with children. I don't have anything to do with criminals or gambling or... You married one. Dante's words were brutal in their honesty. Maybe you didn't know it, but it doesn't matter. His debts are your debts. His enemies are your enemies. That's how this works. No. Ava grabbed her bag, panic finally overwhelming shock. No, I'm leaving. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to talk to Michael, and we're going to figure this out like adults. Whatever you think you know. I know that 3 people who owed the Calabreses money disappeared last month. I know that 2 of them had wives. And I know that those wives were found in places that made identifying them difficult. Dante's eyes were black holes, pulling her in. Stay here tonight. Let me confirm what I suspect. Then we'll figure out what to do with you. What to do with me? Fury spiked through the fear. I'm not a problem that needs solving. I'm a person. The front door exploded inward. It happened so fast that Ava's mind couldn't process it. The wood splintering, armed men in dark clothes flooding through the entrance. Weapons raised and shouting commands that overlapped into meaningless noise. Dante moved even faster. He grabbed Ava's arm, yanked her behind him, and had a gun in his hand. Where the hell had he been hiding a gun before she could draw breath to scream? Russo! One of the intruders shouted. Where's our money? Wrong house, Dante called back, his voice steady despite the fresh blood streaming down his bandaged shoulder. But I appreciate the home invasion. Really adds to the ambiance. We know Bennett's connected to you. We know his wife is here. The speaker stepped forward, a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and eyes like dead fish. Hand her over, and maybe we don't burn this whole place down. Everything inside Ava went cold and still. They'd come for her. These men with guns and violence had come specifically for her, tracking her somehow, knowing she was here. Michael's debts hadn't just endangered their finances. They'd endangered her life. Here's a counteroffer, Dante said, and Ava could hear the smile in his voice even if she couldn't see his face. You leave now, and I don't kill every single one of you before you make it back to your cars. Scarface laughed. You're bleeding out, Russo. You've got maybe 3 guards in this whole house. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Am I? The lights went out. Not just in the house. Everywhere. The streetlights outside, the neighboring estates, the glow of the city in the distance. Everything went dark as though someone had thrown a switch on the entire grid. Then gunfire erupted. Ava hit the floor on instinct, Dante's weight covering her as the dining room transformed into a war zone. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness in strobing chaos, the crack of weapons so loud it felt like her eardrums would burst. She couldn't see anything, couldn't think past the primal terror that they were going to die here, on this expensive floor, surrounded by strangers with murder in their hands. Something heavy hit the ground near her head. She didn't want to know what. And then as suddenly as it started, the shooting stopped. The lights flickered back on, revealing carnage. 4 bodies, the intruders, lay scattered across the entrance hall and living room. Dante's men, and there were more than 3, way more than 3, emerged from positions Ava hadn't even known existed, weapons still raised, faces expressionless as they checked each body for signs of life. "Clear," one of them reported. Dante pushed himself up, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. Fresh blood soaked through the bandage Ava had just applied. He looked down at her, still sprawled on the floor, her scrubs now decorated with wood splinters and someone else's blood. "Still want to go home?" he asked. Ava stared up at him, this man who moved like violence and smiled like sin, this stranger who'd somehow become the only thing standing between her and a brutal death. Her ears rang, her hands shook. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to get as far from this nightmare as physically possible. But she'd seen the bodies, knew what they'd come to do to her. And she knew, with cold certainty, that Dante Russo had just saved her life. "No," she whispered. "No, I don't want to go home." His smile was sharp and satisfied. "Good, because we've got a lot to talk about, Ava Bennett, starting with what your husband's really been up to and what you're going to do about it." The bodies were gone within an hour. Ava watched from the second-floor window as Dante's men worked with military efficiency, wrapping the dead in plastic sheeting, loading them into unmarked vans that appeared from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. The broken door was already being replaced by a crew that arrived with new wood and tools, working in silence like they'd done this 100 times before. Maybe they had. She'd stopped shaking about 20 minutes ago, right around the time one of Dante's men, a broad-shouldered enforcer named Marco, had brought her a glass of water and told her in broken English that she was safe now. The kindness in his eyes had somehow been more terrifying than the violence, because it meant this was normal for them. Death and cleanup. Blood and business. "You should rest." Ava turned to find Dante standing in the doorway, his wounded shoulder freshly bandaged by one of his men, who apparently had more medical training than she'd given them credit for. He'd changed into a black t-shirt that stretched across his chest. And despite everything, despite the nightmare she'd just witnessed, Ava found herself noticing the way he moved, all coiled power and dangerous grace. "I can't rest," she said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see bodies, blood, death." Dante crossed to stand beside her at the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "It gets easier." "I don't want it to get easier," Ava's voice cracked. "I don't want any of this to be normal." Too late for that. He gestured to the scene below, where the last van was pulling away into the night. "The moment you got into my car, normal stopped being an option." She wanted to argue, to insist that this was temporary, that she could still go back to her life. But the words died in her throat because they both knew the truth. Those men had come specifically for her, had tracked her to Dante's house, had been willing to kill her to get to Michael's debts. Her husband had sold her life for his addiction. "Tell me everything," Ava said quietly. "No more half-truths. No more protecting me from the reality. If I'm already in this deep, I deserve to know exactly what I'm in." Dante studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering in his dark eyes. Then he nodded and gestured toward the sitting room across the hall. "Come on, you're going to want to sit down for this." The sitting room was smaller than the dining room, but no less intimidating. Leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes that looked actually read, a fireplace that roared to life when Dante pressed a switch. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed one to Ava. "I don't drink," she said automatically. "You do tonight." His tone left no room for argument. "Trust me, you'll need it." Ava took the glass, the whiskey burning her throat in a way that felt almost cleansing. She settled into one of the leather chairs while Dante took the one opposite, his posture relaxed despite the fresh gunshot wound and the bodies that had just been carted away from his front entrance. "Your husband," Dante began, "started gambling at an underground card room called The Blind 19 months ago. It's run by the Calabrese family, specifically by Victor Calabrese and his nephew Tony. They're old-school organized crime, protection rackets, money laundering, loan sharking, the works. I thought that kind of thing didn't exist anymore, Ava said weakly. I thought organized crime was something from movies. It exists. It's just quieter now, smarter. Dante swirled the whiskey in his glass. The Calabreses have been operating in Seattle for 30 years. They've got judges on payroll, cops who look the other way, enough legitimate businesses to wash their dirty money clean. On paper, they're respectable businessmen. In reality, they're predators. And Michael gambled with them. Gambled, lost, borrowed to cover his losses, lost again, borrowed more. Dante's voice was clinical, detached. Classic spiral. By the time you took out your first mortgage, he was already $50,000 in the hole. The second mortgage, that bought him another 3 months before the interest started compounding faster than he could pay. The number hit Ava like a physical blow. $50,000. She'd been working double shifts, cutting coupons, buying generic groceries, and Michael had been burning through money faster than she could imagine. How much does he owe now? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. $140,000, give or take. Dante watched her face carefully. But the Calabreses don't actually want the money. They want leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that involves you. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. The Calabreses know I've been cutting into their territory. They know I've been bleeding them dry, taking over their operations one piece at a time. They need something to slow me down, to make me vulnerable. A hostage would work perfectly. Ava's blood went cold. They were going to take me to use against you, but I don't even know you. I just met you tonight. They don't know that. All they know is Michael Bennett's wife got into my car, came to my house, and stayed here while I was wounded. From their perspective, you're either working for me or involved with me. Either way, you're valuable. This is insane. Ava stood, pacing the length of the room, her mind racing through implications that multiplied like cancer. Michael doesn't know you. I don't know you. How would they even make that connection? Because I've been looking into your husband for the last 2 weeks. Dante's admission stopped her cold. One of my informants told me the Calabreses were getting aggressive about a debt, planning something big. I started digging, found out it was connected to Michael Bennett, and decided to keep tabs on him. When I saw you get out of his truck tonight, stranded and vulnerable, I made a decision. What decision? To use you. The words were brutal in their honesty, and Ava felt something inside her chest crack wider. She'd thought Dante had helped her out of some twisted sense of chivalry, maybe even attraction, but it had all been calculated, strategic. You used me, she repeated, her voice hollow. You let me patch you up, made me think I was safe here. And all along you were just, what, bait? A way to draw out the Calabreses? Yes. Dante stood, crossing to her with measured steps. But I also saved your life. Those men would have found you eventually, with or without my involvement. At least this way you're still breathing. Breathing, but trapped. Ava laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. I traded one prison for another. You traded certain death for a chance at survival. Dante's voice went hard. Don't mistake what happened tonight. The Calabreses don't take prisoners for long. They would have tortured you for information about Michael, maybe sent him pieces of you until he came up with money he doesn't have. Then they would have killed you both and dumped your bodies where no one would find them for months. That was your future, Ava. I changed it. She wanted to hit him, wanted to scream in rage and break something expensive, but more than that, she wanted to know if he was lying, if this was just another manipulation. The problem was, everything he'd said matched what she'd seen. The violence, the efficiency, the cold calculation in how Dante's men had handled the bodies. These were people who made problems disappear. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Information. Dante moved to the fireplace, the flames casting shadows across his face that made him look like something out of a Renaissance painting. Beautiful and damned. Your husband knows things. Places the Calabreses operate, people they've bought, how their money moves. He might not realize what he knows, but after 19 months of gambling in their establishment, he's seen things. What, and you think he'll just tell me these things? I think you're going to go home tomorrow and have a very specific conversation with your husband. You're going to tell him you were mugged, that you spent the night at a friend's house, that you need to talk about your marriage. And while you're talking, you're going to ask him about his gambling, where he goes, who he owes, what he's seen. Ava shook her head. Michael won't talk to me about this. He barely talks to me about anything anymore. He will when you tell him the Calabreses know where you live, when you tell him you're scared, when you make him believe that the only way to protect you is to give up everything he knows. Dante's smile was sharp. You're a nurse, Ava. You know how to read people, how to make them trust you, how to get them to tell you things they wouldn't tell anyone else. Use those skills. You want me to manipulate my husband. I want you to survive. The manipulation is just how we get there. The worst part was that it made sense. Horrible, twisted sense, but sense nonetheless. If Michael really had dragged her into this nightmare, then he owed her the truth. And if that truth could somehow keep her alive, protect her from the Calabreses, then wasn't she justified in using whatever means necessary to get it? What happens after I get this information? Ava asked. What do you do with it? I dismantle their operation piece by piece, cut off their income streams, expose their bought officials, turn their own people against them. By the time I'm done, the Calabrese family won't have the resources or the power to come after you or anyone else. And Michael? Dante's expression hardened. Your husband made his choices. He gambled with money he didn't have, borrowed from people he couldn't pay back, and put you in the crosshairs of killers. Whatever happens to him is a consequence of those choices. You're going to kill him. It wasn't a question. I'm going to do what's necessary to protect my interests. If that means killing him, then yes. Dante met her eyes without flinching. But if you can convince him to disappear, to leave Seattle and never come back, I'm not going to waste resources hunting him down. He's not important enough for that. The casual way he discussed murder should have terrified Ava, should have sent her running for the door, consequences be damned. But instead, she found herself thinking about Michael's hands shoving her out of the truck, his voice calling her a bitch, the years of lies and hidden debts and slow erosion of everything they'd built together. Maybe she should have been horrified by how little she cared about his survival. I need to think, she said finally, about all of this. You have until morning. Dante gestured toward the doorway. There's a guest room at the end of the hall, second floor. Everything you need is there. My men will be watching the house, so don't try to leave. For your own safety. Am I a guest or a prisoner? Does it matter? Ava wanted to say yes, wanted to insist that the distinction was everything, but standing in this room full of expensive furniture and old books, her scrubs still splattered with blood that might have been hers if Dante hadn't intervened, she wasn't sure anymore what the difference was between protection and captivity. She left without another word, climbing the stairs to the guest room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The room was exactly as impersonal as the rest of the house. King bed with hotel white linens, attached bathroom with fluffy towels, and unopened toiletries. A closet that held clothes in various sizes still tagged and pristine. Dante kept a whole wardrobe for unexpected guests. Of course he did. Ava showered, washing away the blood and rain and fear, letting the water run so hot it turned her skin pink. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, she found her phone charging on the nightstand. Someone, probably Marco or one of the other guards, had retrieved it from where it had shattered on the sidewalk outside the hospital. The screen was cracked but functional. 23 missed calls from Michael, 14 voicemails, 37 text messages that ranged from angry to apologetic to threatening. She didn't read them, didn't listen to the voicemails, just set the phone back down and climbed into bed, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced through everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. This morning, she'd been Ava Bennett, pediatric nurse, devoted wife, woman who endured. Tonight, she was something else entirely. A pawn in a war she didn't understand, caught between a husband who'd betrayed her and a criminal who'd saved her for his own purposes. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and full of blood. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, still caught in the space between dreaming and waking, Ava thought she was in a hotel. Then memory crashed back, and with it came the sick understanding that her life had fundamentally changed. There was no going back to before, no pretending last night hadn't happened. She dressed in clothes from the closet, jeans that fit surprisingly well, a soft gray sweater, socks that were mercifully her size. Someone had even left a package of unopened underwear in the bathroom, which should have been thoughtful, but instead felt invasive, like Dante had planned for exactly this scenario. Maybe he had. Downstairs, she found him in the kitchen, cooking eggs and bacon, like he hadn't been shot less than 12 hours ago. He'd changed the bandage again. She could see the fresh white gauze peeking out from under a fitted black Henley, but otherwise showed no signs of the injury or the firefight that had followed. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's fresh. Mugs are in the cabinet above the machine." Ava poured herself a cup, adding cream and sugar from containers that looked untouched, and settled onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. The normalcy of the scene was surreal, domestic, almost comfortable. If she ignored the guns she could see holstered under the jackets of the two guards stationed by the windows. "How's the shoulder?" she asked, falling back on professional instinct. "Sore but functional." Dante plated the eggs and bacon, sliding one portion across to her. "Eat." "You didn't have dinner last night." She hadn't, she realized. Hadn't eaten since a protein bar around 3 yesterday afternoon. Her stomach growled at the sight of real food, betraying her body's priorities even while her mind was still reeling. They ate in silence for several minutes. The only sounds, the scrape of forks on plates, and the distant murmur of guards talking in the next room. It was Dante who finally broke the quiet. "I had my people look into Michael's movements last night. After he dropped you off, he went to a bar in Fremont. Got drunk, got in a fight, got kicked out. Then he drove home and passed out on the couch. He's been there ever since." "You're watching my house." Another violation, another reminder that privacy was a luxury she no longer had. "I'm watching everything connected to you. It's the only way to keep you alive." Dante set down his fork, his expression serious. "The Calabreses are going to come after you again. Last night was sloppy, an impulse move because they thought they had an opportunity. Next time will be planned, precise, unless we give them a reason to back off. And how do we do that? By making you worthless as leverage." He stood, crossing to a laptop on the counter and opening it to reveal what looked like surveillance footage. "We staged your death." Ava's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "A car accident. Late night, bad weather, driver loses control and goes over the embankment on Highway 99. Vehicle catches fire. Body burned beyond recognition." Dante's voice was clinical, like he was describing a grocery list. "It happens all the time. No one questions it." "You want to fake my death." The words felt absurd coming out of her mouth. "You want to make everyone, my husband, my family, my friends, think I'm dead." "I want to make the Calabreses think you're dead. Everyone else is collateral damage." Dante pulled up another window, this one showing what looked like financial records. "Once you're officially deceased, you're worthless to them. They'll shift focus back to Michael, who'll either pay up or disappear. Either way, you're safe." Safe but dead. Safe but erased. Ava shook her head, the enormity of it crushing down on her. "I have a life, Dante. A job. Friends. A sister in Portland. I can't just vanish." "You can and you will if you want to survive." His patience was wearing thin. She could hear it in the edge that crept into his voice. "The alternative is spending the rest of your very short life looking over your shoulder, waiting for the Calabreses to grab you off the street or put a bullet in your head while you're walking to your car after a shift. Is that what you want?" No, it wasn't, but the alternative felt like dying in a different way. "What would I do?" she asked quietly. "After I'm dead, where would I go?" "You'd stay here. Work for me." Dante's smile was sharp. "I could use someone with medical training on staff. My men get hurt more often than I'd like to admit, and having a nurse who doesn't ask questions would be valuable. You want me to be your personal medic. I want you to be alive. The job is just how we make that happen." He closed the laptop, his dark eyes fixed on her face. "Think about it, Ava. Really think. What are you going back to? A husband who threw you away like garbage? A job that pays you barely enough to survive while you work yourself to death? Debt you didn't create and can't escape? That's not a life. That's just slow dying." His words cut deep because they were true. Ava had been slowly dying for years, sacrificing herself piece by piece for a marriage that was already a corpse and a career that drained her without filling her back up. She told herself it was noble, this self-sacrifice, that enduring made her strong, but maybe enduring just made her a victim. I need to talk to Michael first, she said. Need to hear him explain himself. Need to know if any of this was ever real. Dante studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. But you're not going alone, and you're not going unprepared. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and set it aside. Marco will drive you. 2 other men will watch the house from outside. You go in, have your conversation, get what information you can, and get out. 30 minutes maximum. And if Michael won't let me leave, then my men will extract you, by force if necessary. Dante's expression went cold. Your husband stopped having rights to you the moment he put you in danger. Don't forget that. 20 minutes later, Ava was in the back of a black SUV with Marco at the wheel and 2 armed men she didn't know in the front passenger seat. They drove through Seattle in silence, the city looking different in daylight, cleaner somehow, less threatening, like the storm had washed away the evidence of last night's violence. Her house, when they pulled up to it, looked exactly as she'd left it. Small craftsman bungalow in Ballard, blue paint that needed refreshing, yard that needed weeding. Michael's truck was in the driveway and she could see lights on inside. He was awake, waiting. 30 minutes, Marco reminded her, his accent making the words heavy. We come in after that. Ava nodded, not trusting her voice, and climbed out of the SUV. The walk to her front door felt like miles instead of yards, each step carrying her closer to a confrontation she'd been avoiding for years. She used her key, walked into her own house like a stranger. Michael was on the couch, exactly where Dante had said he'd be, looking like death warmed over. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes from last night. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment something like relief crossed his face. Ava, Christ, I've been calling you all night. Where were you? Are you okay? She almost laughed at the concern in his voice. Almost believed it was genuine. Where was I? Her voice came out colder than she'd intended. Where was I while you were drinking yourself unconscious? I was surviving, Michael. I was dealing with the consequences of your choices. He stood, swaying slightly, and she caught the smell of stale alcohol and sweat. What are you talking about? I know I was an asshole last night, okay? I shouldn't have made you get out of the truck. I was drunk and angry and drowning in gambling debts you never told me about. Ava cut him off, watching his face go pale. $140,000, Michael. That's how much you owe the Calabrese family. That's how deep you've buried us. Who told you that? Panic replaced the hangover in his eyes. Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? The point is, I know. I know about the blind, about the money you've been burning through, about the second mortgage you took out to cover debts I didn't even know existed. She moved closer, and Michael took a step back. What I don't know is why. Why you destroy everything we built for a card game? It wasn't supposed to be like this. His voice broke. I was winning at first. I was good at it, Ava. For the first time in years, I was good at something, and it felt like I mattered, like I wasn't just your charity project. The words hit her like a slap. Charity project? Come on. You think I don't know? You think I don't see the way you look at me? Like I'm another patient you need to fix, another problem you need to solve. Michael's laugh was bitter. I lost my job 3 years ago, and you just took on more shifts. I couldn't find work, and you just worked harder. I was drowning, and instead of throwing me a rope, you just paid for swimming lessons and expected me to figure it out. So you gambled. Ava's voice was flat. You took our money, my money from working myself to death, and you gambled it away because your pride was hurt. I was trying to fix it, trying to get us back to even, to surprise you with money for once, instead of always taking it. He ran his hands through his hair, and she noticed for the first time how much gray had crept in at his temples. When had that happened? But I kept losing. And the more I lost, the more I needed to win it back. They kept giving me credit, kept telling me my luck would turn. And then suddenly, I was in so deep I couldn't see daylight anymore. The Calabreses came after me last night. Ava watched his face carefully. They tracked me down, tried to kidnap me. 4 men with guns, Michael. They were going to take me to force you to pay up faster. All color drained from Michael's face. No, they said. They told me they'd give me more time. They promised they wouldn't touch you. They lied. Because that's what criminals do. She moved to the window, checking to make sure Marco was still there. He was, standing beside the SUV like a well-dressed sentinel. I need you to tell me everything. Every place you've been, every person you've met, everything you've seen at the blind, names, faces, operations, all of it. Why? What are you going to do with that information? I'm going to use it to keep us both alive. The lie came easily. There are people who can help us, but they need to know what they're dealing with. So talk, Michael. Tell me everything, and maybe we can find a way out of this. He did. For the next 20 minutes, Michael Bennett spilled his secrets like blood from a wound, telling her about Victor Calabrese's nephew Tony, who ran the card room, about the judges and cops who showed up to play, about the money laundering operation he'd witnessed in the back office when he'd gone looking for a bathroom. He told her about threats and violence, about other gamblers who disappeared when they couldn't pay, about the fear that kept him coming back even when he knew he was destroying everything. Ava listened, memorizing every detail, her training helping her sort information from emotion. And when he was done, when he'd given her everything he had, she looked at her husband and felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hatred, just empty recognition of a stranger who'd worn a familiar face for too long. I'm leaving you, she said quietly. Michael's head snapped up. What? No, Ava, we can work through this. There's nothing to work through. You've been lying to me for years, risking my life for your addiction, dragging me into a world I never chose. Whatever we had, it's gone. It's been gone for a long time. I was just too stubborn to admit it. Please. He reached for her, and she stepped back. Ava, please. I know I messed up, but I love you. I still love you. You don't even know what that word means. She moved toward the door, her 30 minutes nearly up. I'll have a lawyer contact you about divorce papers. Don't try to find me. Don't call. Don't text. Don't show up at my work. As far as you're concerned, I'm gone. You can't just leave. We're married. We made vows. You broke those vows the first time you lied to me about where our money went. Ava opened the door, letting in cold air and the sound of traffic. Disappear, Michael. Leave Seattle, change your name, do whatever you have to do to survive. But don't drag anyone else down with you. She walked out, closing the door on 12 years of her life like it was a chapter in a book she'd already forgotten. Marco opened the SUV door for her, his expression carefully neutral, and Ava climbed in without looking back. You get what you needed? He asked as they pulled away from the curb. Everything and more. Ava watched her house shrink in the side mirror until it disappeared around a corner. Tell Dante I'm ready to hear his plan. All of it. Because the truth was, there was nothing left to go back to. Michael had burned their life down around them both, and Ava was tired of standing in the ashes pretending she could rebuild. Maybe Dante's offer was a prison. Maybe working for a crime boss made her complicit in violence she'd spent her career opposing. But maybe, for the first time in years, she'd be choosing her own cage. And that had to count for something. Dante was waiting in his study when they returned, surrounded by monitors displaying surveillance feeds from what looked like half the city. He glanced up as Ava entered, his dark eyes assessing her with the precision of a surgeon evaluating a patient. Well? He asked. Ava sank into the leather chair across from his desk, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Tony Calabrese runs the blind out of a building in Belltown, corner of 3rd and Bell. They've got at least 2 judges on payroll, Judge Harrington from Superior Court and Judge Chen from the district bench. There's also a police sergeant named Kowalski who provides advance warning about raids. She continued, reciting everything Michael had told her with the clinical detachment she'd perfected during 12-hour shifts. The money laundering operation. The loan shark named Polly, who broke fingers when payments were late. The back room where high-stakes games ran until dawn, attended by people whose names Michael had recognized from newspapers and local politics. When she finished, Dante was smiling, not the sharp, dangerous smile she'd seen before, but something closer to genuine pleasure. Your husband's an idiot, he said, but he's an observant idiot. This is more than I hoped for. He turned to his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. With this information, I can move against 3 of their primary revenue streams simultaneously, cut off their cash flow, expose their bought officials, Create enough chaos that they'll be too busy putting out fires to come after you. And then what? Ava asked. They just forget about me? Forget about the 140,000 Michael owes them? They'll write it off as a loss. Your husband will disappear or die. Frankly, I don't care which, and you'll be officially deceased as of tomorrow night. Dante pulled up a document on one of his screens. I've already got people working on the accident scene. Stolen car matching your general description, body from the morgue that's close enough in height and build. The fire will take care of the rest. The casual way he discussed using a corpse should have horrified her. Instead, Ava found herself asking, where did you get a body? Does it matter? Yes. She met his eyes. If I'm going to let you fake my death, I need to know you're not killing innocent people to make it happen. Something flickered in Dante's expression. Respect, maybe, or surprise. Jane Doe from 3 weeks ago. Overdose victim, no family, no identification. She was going to be cremated by the county anyway. This way, she serves a purpose. It was a rationalization, but Ava found herself accepting it. What was one more moral compromise in a life that had already crossed so many lines she'd lost count? When? She asked. Tomorrow night, around midnight. You'll leave your house, supposedly going to the store. Security footage will show you getting into your car. 2 miles later, the vehicle goes off the road. Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was describing a grocery list. By morning, you'll be headline news. Tragic accident, beloved nurse, community mourning. The Calabreses will see it, verify it, and move on. And I'll be here. Ava looked around the study, this room in this house that was already starting to feel more real than the home she'd left behind. Working for you, patching up gunshot wounds and keeping my mouth shut. You'll be alive. Dante stood, moving to the window that overlooked his manicured grounds. Everything else is negotiable. What about my sister, my friends from work? They'll think I'm dead. Yes, and you'll let them, because the alternative is putting them in danger. He turned back to face her. The moment you contact anyone from your old life, you create a trail, a weakness the Calabreses can exploit. Is that what you want, to risk the people you care about just so you can say goodbye? No, it wasn't. But the thought of her sister Emily finding out through a news report, of her friends at Seattle, Grace gathering for a memorial she wouldn't attend, of everyone she'd ever known grieving a death that hadn't happened, it felt like dying in a different way. I need to make a call, Ava said quietly. One call, to my sister, to tell her something. I can't just vanish without a word. Dante considered this for a long moment. You'll use a burner phone. You'll keep it vague, and you'll never contact her again. Those are the terms. Fine. He produced a phone from his desk drawer, prepaid, untraceable, and handed it to her. You have 5 minutes. Make them count. Ava took the phone with trembling hands and walked to the far corner of the study, as far from Dante's hearing as she could manage in the confined space. She dialed Emily's number from memory, her heart hammering as the line rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Her sister's voice was cautious, not recognizing the number. It's me. Ava's voice cracked. It's Ava. Ava? Whose phone are you? Are you okay? I've been trying to call you all morning. Michael said you didn't come home last night. Of course he had. Of course Michael had already started building his alibi, making himself look like the concerned husband. I'm fine. I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to listen. Ava fought to keep her voice steady. Things with Michael are over. Really over. I'm leaving him, and I'm leaving Seattle for a while. I need space to figure out what comes next. Wait, what? Ava, slow down. What happened? I found out he's been lying to me about money, about debts, about everything. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was close enough. I can't stay here anymore, Em. I can't keep trying to fix something that's been broken for years. Okay. Emily's voice shifted into problem-solving mode, the same tone she used with her kids when they were upset. Okay, come to Portland. Stay with us. You can figure things out here, away from him. I can't. I need to be completely away from everything, from everyone. The lie tasted like ash. I'm going to stay with a friend, somewhere Michael can't find me, somewhere I can think. What friend? Ava, you're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. Tears were building behind Ava's eyes, but she forced them back. But I need you to trust me. I need you to let me do this my way. And if If anything happens, if you hear anything about me, I need you to remember that I love you, that you and the kids are the best thing I ever had in my life. You're talking like you're saying goodbye forever, like you're... Emily's breath caught. Are you safe? Is Michael threatening you? Because if he is, I swear to... I'm safe, I promise. The lie came easier this time. I just need time. Can you give me that? A long pause filled with all the questions Emily wanted to ask but didn't. Finally, she said, How do I reach you? You don't. I'll contact you when I'm ready, when I've figured things out. Ava checked the time, 4.5 minutes. I have to go. Tell the kids I love them. Tell them Aunt Ava will see them again someday. Ava, wait. She ended the call before her resolve could break, handing the phone back to Dante with shaking hands. He took it without comment, removed the battery, and dropped both pieces in a drawer. That was hard, he observed. Everything about this is hard. Ava sank back into her chair, feeling hollowed out. But necessary. I get it. Good. Dante returned to his desk, pulling up new files on his computer. Now, let's talk about what happens after you're dead, the practical aspects. For the next hour, he laid out her new reality with brutal efficiency. She'd live in this house, in the guest room she'd already occupied. She'd be on call 24/7 for medical emergencies. His men, his associates, anyone in his organization who needed care they couldn't get from traditional sources. In exchange, she'd have room and board, a salary deposited into an account under a new identity, and protection from the Calabreses and anyone else who might wish her harm. What about credentials? Ava asked. I can't practice medicine without a license. You won't be practicing medicine. You'll be providing private care to private individuals. Dante's smile was thin. The legality is questionable, but then again, so is everything else about this arrangement. And if I want to leave, eventually, when the danger's past, then you'll have enough money saved to start over somewhere new. New name, new credentials, new life. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. But I suspect by the time that happens, you won't want to leave. Why not? Because you'll realize that this life, this dangerous, morally ambiguous life, is more honest than the one you left behind. At least here, people don't pretend to be something they're not. At least here, you'll know exactly where you stand. Ava wanted to argue, to insist that her old life had meaning and value. But the words wouldn't come, because maybe Dante was right. Maybe spending 12 years in a dying marriage while working herself to exhaustion for a healthcare system that treated nurses like disposable resources wasn't actually noble. Maybe it was just another kind of prison, one with prettier bars. When do we start? She asked. Now. Dante stood, gesturing for her to follow. I want you to meet the rest of my core team. If you're going to be part of this organization, you need to understand how it works. He led her through the house to a wing she hadn't yet explored, down a staircase that descended into what she'd assumed was a basement, but turned out to be something far more sophisticated. The lower level was a command center, multiple rooms filled with technology, weapons, and people who looked up when Dante entered with expressions of wary respect. Everyone, this is Ava Bennett, Dante announced. She'll be handling medical for the organization from now on. Treat her with the same respect you'd show me. Any problems she brings to you get priority attention. Clear? A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Ava recognized Marco among the assembled men, along with several faces from the night before. But there were others too. A woman with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones who Dante introduced as Sophia, his head of intelligence. A man called Chen, who apparently ran their tech operations. And a quiet, dangerous-looking individual named Alexei, who said nothing but whose handshake felt like being gripped by a vice. Sophia will get you set up with new identification, Dante said. Chen will create your digital footprint, social media, employment history, everything you'll need to exist as someone other than Ava Bennett. Alexei handles security. If you need to go anywhere outside this house, he or one of his team goes with you. I'm a prisoner then, Ava kept her voice flat. You're protected, Dante corrected. There's a difference. But as the afternoon wore into evening and various members of Dante's organization briefed her on protocols and procedures, Ava wasn't sure she believed him. This was a gilded cage, certainly more comfortable than most prisons, but a cage nonetheless. Every freedom came with conditions. Every choice was bounded by Dante's rules. Still, when Marco appeared around 7 with dinner, takeout from a Thai place that Ava had loved but could never afford, she found herself grateful. When Sophia showed her pictures of the identification documents being prepared, driver's license, passport, even a nursing license for her new identity, she felt something like excitement. And when Dante reappeared around 9, his shoulder freshly bandaged and moving with only slight stiffness, she realized she'd stopped thinking about escape. "How are you holding up?" he asked, finding her in what Sophia had called the medical suite, a fully equipped examination room that would have made most private practices jealous. "I'm processing." Ava was inventorying supplies, making lists of what she'd need to add. "This is surreal, all of it." "It gets easier." Dante leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "The first few days are the hardest. After that, you start to adapt." "Is that what happened to you?" The question came out before Ava could stop it. "You adapted to this life?" "I was born into it." His expression went distant. "My father ran this organization before me. His father before him. I didn't choose this world, it chose me. But I've made it mine, made it better than what I inherited." "Better how?" "My father believed in fear and brutality, breaking people until they bent. I believe in strategy and precision, making people understand that working with me is more profitable than working against me." Dante pushed off the doorframe, moving into the room. "The violence you saw the other night, that was a last resort. Ideally, my enemies never make it far enough to require bullets. But they do sometimes." "Yes, sometimes they do." He didn't look away from her scrutiny. "I won't lie to you about what this is, Ava. I run a criminal organization. We deal in things that are illegal, sometimes immoral, but we also provide services that people need. Protection, loans, dispute resolution in communities where the police won't help. It's not black and white. It's still wrong." "So was letting your husband drain your life away while you pretended everything was fine?" Dante's words were sharp but not cruel. "We all make compromises. The question is whether those compromises lead somewhere worth going." Ava set down the inventory list, meeting his eyes. "And where does this compromise lead? Where do I end up if I stay here, if I become part of your world?" "That depends on what you want." He moved closer and Ava caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "You can be just an employee doing your job and keeping your head down, or you can be more. Learn the business, understand the power structures, become someone who matters in this organization." "Why would you offer me that? You barely know me." "I know enough." Dante's smile was slight but genuine. "You walked into danger to help a stranger. You didn't fall apart when men with guns broke into my house. You extracted information from your husband like a professional interrogator. You're smart, resilient, and adaptable. Those qualities are rare. I'd be an idiot not to cultivate them." The compliment shouldn't have warmed her, but it did. Michael hadn't said anything positive about her in years. The hospital administration saw her as a workhorse, reliable but replaceable. But Dante looked at her like she was valuable, like she mattered beyond what she could provide. It was intoxicating in a way that scared her. "I should rest," she said, stepping back to create distance. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." "It is." Dante didn't try to close the space between them. "But you'll survive it. You're stronger than you think." He left her alone in the medical suite, and Ava spent another hour organizing supplies before finally heading upstairs. The house was quieter at night, most of Dante's men having left for other assignments. Only the core security team remained, their presence marked by soft footsteps and the occasional murmur of conversation. In her room, she was already thinking of it as hers. Ava found that someone had left out clothes for tomorrow. Dark jeans, a nondescript jacket, running shoes. The outfit someone would wear to make a quick trip to the store. The outfit she'd die in, at least according to official records. She tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind racing through everything that would happen in the next 24 hours. By this time tomorrow night, Ava Bennett would be dead. Her life, her identity, her very existence would be erased from everything except memory. And in her place would be someone new, someone without history or obligations, someone free to become whatever she chose. The thought was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Morning came too quickly. Ava went through the motions of breakfast and preparation like an automaton, her body functioning while her mind drifted somewhere distant. Dante was already gone when she came downstairs. Business, Marco explained, but he'd be back before the plan went into motion. Sophia appeared around noon with the promised identification. Sarah Mitchell, she said, spreading documents across the kitchen table. Born in Spokane, moved to Seattle 5 years ago for work. Current employer is listed as a private medical staffing agency. It'll hold up to casual scrutiny, and by the time anyone digs deeper, the trail will be too cold to matter. Ava studied the driver's license photo. Her face but somehow different, the makeup slightly altered, her hair pulled back in a way she never wore it. Sarah Mitchell looked like someone who'd made different choices. Better choices, maybe. Thank you, she said. Sophia's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, you're making the right call. The Calabreses don't forget. They don't forgive. This is the only way you stay breathing. The afternoon crawled by. Ava tried to stay busy, reviewing medical protocols, organizing her new workspace, anything to keep her mind occupied. But her thoughts kept drifting to Emily, to her friends at work, to the life she was about to burn to ash. Dante returned around 6, looking tired but satisfied. It's done, he said, finding her in the medical suite. The Calabreses lost 2 major revenue streams today. Their card room got raided by federal agents following an anonymous tip about money laundering. Judge Harrington was caught on camera accepting a bribe, totally unrelated to us, of course. By tomorrow, they'll be too busy with damage control to worry about tracking down Michael Bennett's widow. Ex-wife, Ava corrected automatically. Right, ex-wife. Dante's smile was sharp. Speaking of which, Michael filed a missing persons report this morning. Said you never came home 2 nights ago, that he's worried sick. Very convincing performance. He's good at performing. The bitterness in her voice surprised even Ava. 12 years of practice. Well, his performance is about to become a tragedy. Dante checked his watch. We move at 11. You'll drive to the store in your car. We've already swapped it out for an identical model with the stolen VIN. The route is preset. Cameras will catch you at key points. At 11:40, the vehicle goes off the road. Chen will trigger the accelerant remotely. The fire will be hot enough to... I don't need the details. Ava held up a hand. I trust you know what you're doing. I do. But he studied her face. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to attend my own funeral. She laughed, but it came out hollow. Is that normal? There's nothing normal about what you're doing, but for what it's worth, I think you're handling it better than most people would. Dante moved closer, and this time Ava didn't step back. After tonight, there's no going back. You understand that, right? Once you're dead, you can't be resurrected, not without endangering everyone involved. I understand. And she did, with a clarity that was almost painful. Ava Bennett dies tonight. Only Sarah Mitchell walks out of those flames. The hours until 11 passed in a blur. Ava changed into the clothes that had been laid out, feeling like she was dressing for her own wake. Marco drove her to her house, former house, she corrected herself, where her car sat in the driveway looking exactly as she'd left it 2 mornings ago. Except it wasn't her car. Not really. Just an identical copy, prepared for destruction. You remember the route? Marco asked. Straight down Aurora, right on 125th, off the embankment near the bridge. Ava's voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. 11:40, exactly. Chen will handle the rest. You just drive. Marco's expression was almost kind. We'll be right behind you. Anything goes wrong, we extract you immediately. Ava nodded, not trusting her voice. She climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway for the last time. In her rear-view mirror, she could see Marco's SUV following at a discreet distance. The drive was surreal. Every landmark she passed felt weighted with significance. The grocery store where she'd shopped for years, the park where she and Michael used to walk before everything fell apart, the hospital where she'd spent countless hours saving other people's children while her own life bled out in increments. All of it was ending. All of it would become memory, then eventually less than that. Just stories people told about the nice nurse who died too young. Aurora Avenue stretched out before her, wet with rain that had started falling around 10. The weather was perfect for an accident. Poor visibility, slick roads, a tragedy waiting to happen. Ava checked the clock on the dashboard. 11:35, 5 minutes. Her phone rang. Dante's voice when she answered. You still good? As good as I'll ever be. Chen's ready on his end. At 11:40, you'll feel the car accelerate. Don't fight it. Just let it happen. We'll pull you out before the fire reaches the cabin. And if something goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. His voice was absolutely certain. I don't fail, Ava. Not at this. The confidence should have been arrogant, but instead it was oddly comforting. Dante Russo didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Okay. Ava took a deep breath. Let's kill me. She ended the call. The clock ticked over to 11:39. Ahead, she could see the curve where the road ran parallel to the embankment, a steep drop to the industrial area below. No guardrail here. Budget cuts had delayed installation for years. It was the perfect place for a fatal accident. 11:40. The car's engine roared to life beneath her, acceleration sudden and powerful. Ava's hands tightened on the wheel reflexively, but she didn't fight as the vehicle shot forward, picking up speed with terrifying efficiency. 60 miles per hour. 70, 80. The curve was coming up fast, too fast to make even if she tried. Ava aimed for the weakest point in the shoulder, the place where rain had already eroded the asphalt. The tires hit loose gravel, lost traction, and suddenly she was airborne. Time slowed down. Ava saw the ground rushing up, saw the industrial buildings that would have been the last thing she ever saw if this were real. Then impact, the car slamming into earth and concrete, metal shrieking, glass shattering, her body jerking against the seatbelt hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. The driver's door was ripped open before she could process what had happened. Marco's hands were on her, unclipping the seatbelt, dragging her from the wreckage with efficient strength. She stumbled, her legs not quite working, and he caught her. Go, go, go! Someone was shouting. They ran, Marco half carrying her, to the SUV idling 30 yards away. Ava looked back just in time to see flames erupt from the crashed vehicle, hungry orange consuming metal and paint, and the body that wasn't hers, but would be identified as hers. Then they were in the SUV, tires shrieking as they accelerated away from the scene. In the distance, Ava could already hear sirens. Did it work? She asked, her voice shaking. Perfectly. Marco's grin was fierce. Welcome to the dead, Sarah Mitchell. Ava Bennett was dead. Long live Sarah Mitchell. The thought should have devastated her. Instead, as they drove through the rain-soaked streets toward Dante's house, toward her new life, Ava felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt free. The news broke at 6 in the morning. Ava, Sarah, she corrected herself for the 100th time, watched it on the television in Dante's study, standing next to the man who'd orchestrated her death, with the same detachment a director might watch dailies from yesterday's shoot. The reporter stood at the crash site, rain still falling, emergency lights painting everything in red and blue. Tragic accident claims the life of Seattle nurse Ava Bennett. The anchor's voice was appropriately somber. The 34-year-old pediatric nurse was pronounced dead at the scene after her vehicle left the roadway on Aurora Avenue North around midnight. Authorities say poor weather conditions and excessive speed were likely factors in the crash. The camera panned to show the wreckage being loaded onto a flatbed truck, the shell of what had been her car, now just twisted metal and carbon scoring. Sarah felt nothing looking at it. No grief, no shock, just a strange sense of watching someone else's tragedy unfold. Seattle Grace Medical Center released a statement early this morning. The reporter continued, Hospital Administrator Patricia Vaughn called Bennett a dedicated healthcare professional who touched countless lives during her 12 years of service. Memorial services are pending. They'll find the body within the hour, Dante said quietly. Dental records will match. Sophia made sure of that. By tomorrow, the medical examiner will sign off on the death certificate. You'll be officially gone. Sarah turned away from the screen. What about Michael? Already contacted by police. Gave a statement this morning identifying your car, confirming you'd left the house around 11:30, saying you needed groceries. Dante's expression was unreadable. He cried. Very convincing. He's good at that. The bitterness was automatic now, a reflex she hadn't learned to suppress. Crying, lying, making people believe he cares. He called your sister at 5 a.m., woke her up to tell her you were dead. Dante pulled up something on his computer. An intercepted phone call, Sarah realized. He'd been monitoring everything. She's driving up from Portland this morning. Sarah's chest tightened. Emily would be devastated, would blame herself for not pressing harder during their last conversation, for not sensing something was desperately wrong. And there was nothing Sarah could do about it, no way to ease that pain without risking everything. "I need to work," she said abruptly. "I need to do something with my hands before I lose my mind." "Follow me." Dante led her down to the medical suite where a man Sarah didn't recognize was waiting, his face pale and sweating despite the cool temperature. He'd been shot. She could see it in how he held his left side, the careful way he breathed. "Alexei's cousin," Dante explained. "Took a bullet during a collection that went sideways. Nothing vital hit, but it needs to come out." Sarah's training kicked in immediately, pushing aside grief and guilt and everything else that threatened to overwhelm her. She washed her hands, pulled on gloves, and got to work with the focused intensity that had made her one of Seattle Grace's most reliable nurses. The bullet was lodged between two ribs, close to the intercostal nerve. Dangerous territory. Sarah worked carefully, using local anesthetic this time. She had proper supplies now, proper equipment, and extracted the round with steady hands while Dante watched from the doorway. "You're good at this," he observed. "I've had practice." Sarah didn't look up from her work. Different wounds, same principles. Stop the bleeding, prevent infection, promote healing. "That's not what I meant." Dante moved closer. "You're calm, focused. Most people would be falling apart right now, but you're just working. Because this I can control." Sarah sutured the entry wound with precise, even stitches. "I can't control that my sister is driving through a rainstorm thinking I'm dead. Can't control that people I worked with for years are crying over my broken body. But I can control whether this man bleeds out on your table." "Control is an illusion," Dante said softly. "But I understand the appeal." Sarah finished the sutures, dressed the wound, and gave Alexei's cousin instructions in the firm, no-nonsense tone that had made pediatric patients listen even when they didn't want to. Then she stripped off her gloves and finally met Dante's eyes. "I need to see the news coverage. All of it. I need to know what they're saying about me." He didn't argue, just led her back upstairs to his study where Chen had already compiled everything. Local news, social media, even internal hospital communications that Chen had somehow intercepted. Sarah read through it all with clinical detachment, watching her life be summarized in sound bites and sympathy. Her coworkers at Seattle Grace had set up a memorial fund. Someone had posted a photo of her from last year's holiday party, smiling in a red sweater she'd bought specifically for the occasion. The comments were full of shock and grief, people sharing stories about how kind she'd been, how dedicated, how she'd always stayed late to help with difficult cases. They were mourning a saint, someone who'd never existed, not really. "Michael set up a donation page," Chen said, pointing to another screen, "asking for help with funeral expenses." "Of course he did." Sarah's laugh was sharp. "He'll probably use the money to pay down his debts." "He won't get the chance." Dante's voice was cold. "The Calabreses will come for him within 48 hours. Without you as leverage, he's just a deadbeat debtor. They'll make an example." Sarah should have cared. Should have felt something about the man she'd spent 12 years married to facing torture and death. But when she searched inside herself for sympathy, she found only emptiness. Michael had made his choices. Now he'd live with the consequences, however briefly. "What about the Calabreses themselves?" she asked. "When do you move against them directly?" "Already started." Dante pulled up surveillance footage showing a warehouse being raided. "That's their main distribution center for prescription medications. DEA got an anonymous tip this morning. By the time they sort through the legal mess, Victor Calabrese will have lost half his pharmaceutical operation. And the other half? Burns tonight." Dante's smile was predatory. "Literally. Chen's arranged for an electrical fire around 2 a.m. No casualties, just enough property damage to cripple their supply chain for months." Sarah watched the footage, feeling something dark and satisfied uncurl in her chest. These were the people who'd tried to kidnap her, who'd turned her life into a war zone. Watching their empire crumble should have troubled her. Instead, it felt like justice. "I want to help," she said. Dante's eyebrows rose. "Help how?" "You said you need people with medical knowledge on staff. That's fine, I'll do that. But I also know things about the healthcare system, about how hospitals work, how pharmaceuticals are tracked and distributed. If the Calabreses are running prescription drugs, I might be able to help you understand their operation better. You want in? It wasn't a question. Really in, not just as medical staff. I want to matter. Sarah met his eyes without flinching. I spent 12 years being invisible, being taken for granted, being useful but not valued. You said I could be more here. Prove it. Dante studied her for a long moment, something calculating moving behind his dark eyes. Then he nodded and gestured to the chair beside his desk. Sit. Let's see what you know. They spent the next 3 hours going through the Calabrese operation in detail. Sarah explained how prescription drug diversion worked, how medications disappeared from hospital inventories, how dirty pharmacists and doctors could be identified by prescription patterns. She outlined the regulatory framework, the DEA tracking systems, the weak points where someone knowledgeable could exploit the system. Dante listened with intense focus, occasionally asking questions that revealed how much he already understood about the criminal side of the operation. Together, they built a strategy, not just to destroy the Calabrese pharmaceutical network, but to absorb the profitable parts into Dante's own organization while burning everything else to ash. You're a natural at this, Dante said when they finally took a break. Strategic thinking, understanding systems, seeing vulnerabilities. Have you always been this way? I was a nurse, Sarah said. We're trained to see patterns, anticipate problems, work 3 steps ahead of the crisis. The only difference is now I'm applying those skills to something other than keeping children alive. And you're okay with that? With using your talents for something illegal? Sarah considered the question honestly. Was she okay with it? With becoming part of a criminal organization? With helping to destroy rival operations? With crossing every ethical line she'd spent her career defending? I don't know, she admitted. Ask me again in a month when the shock has worn off. But right now, in this moment, I'd rather be here planning strategy with you than dead in a ditch because my husband gambled with the wrong people. Fair enough. Dante stood, stretching his injured shoulder with only slight stiffness. Come on, there's something I want to show you. He led her down to the lowest level of the house, past the command center to a door Sarah hadn't noticed before. It required a fingerprint scan to open, revealing a room that made her breath catch. It was an armory, but not the crude gun closet she'd expected. This was a museum-quality collection. Handguns, rifles, knives, even a few pieces that looked antique and probably illegal to own. Everything was meticulously organized, maintained with obvious care. My father's collection, Dante explained. He believed in being prepared for every possible scenario. Most of these I'll never use, but they remind me where I came from, what I'm trying to be better than. Sarah moved through the room, careful not to touch anything. And what are you trying to be better than? A man who solved every problem with violence, who ruled through fear instead of respect. Dante picked up a pistol, checked it with practiced efficiency, and held it out to her. My father would have killed you the moment you became a liability. I'm trying to find a different way. By faking my death and making me part of your organization? Sarah didn't take the gun. That's still control, Dante, just dressed up prettier. It's survival, for both of us. He set the pistol back in its case. The Calabreses would have killed you. I gave you a way out. Whether that's control or salvation depends on your perspective. And what's your perspective? That I gave you a choice when your husband took all your choices away. Dante's voice was intense. You could have refused, could have insisted on going home even knowing the risks. I would have let you. But you didn't. You chose this. So own that choice, Sarah. Own what you're becoming. The words hit harder than Sarah expected. Because he was right. She had chosen this. Had walked into his car, had patched his wound, had extracted information from Michael, had climbed into that doomed vehicle and let herself be erased from existence. Every step had been a choice, even when it felt like she had no options. I'm not ready to touch a gun, she said finally. Fair enough, but the offer stands. When you're ready to learn how to protect yourself, really protect yourself, not just hope someone else will, I'll teach you. They returned upstairs to find Sophia waiting with news. The Calabreses are moving, she said without preamble. They've got people watching Michael's house. Victor himself is en route from his estate. How long? Dante asked. Hour, maybe less. They're not being subtle about it. Dante turned to Sarah. Do you want to know what happens to him? I can have Chen set up a feed. Sarah considered it. Part of her wanted to watch, wanted to see Michael face the consequences of his choices, but a larger part knew that watching would change her in ways she wasn't ready for, would make her complicit in his death in a way that simply allowing it to happen didn't. "No," she said. "Just make it quick. Whatever they do to him, don't let them draw it out." "I can't control what the Calabreses do," Dante said carefully, "but I can make sure they don't have much time to work." He gave orders in rapid Italian to Sophia, who nodded and disappeared. Then he turned back to Sarah. "You should rest. It's been a long night and an even longer morning." But Sarah couldn't rest. She spent the afternoon in the medical suite, organizing supplies with obsessive precision while her mind raced through everything that was happening. Michael was about to die. Emily was planning her funeral. Her friends were grieving. And she was here, alive and hidden, helping a crime boss destroy his rivals. The surreal had become reality, so gradually she'd almost missed the transition. Around 4 in the afternoon, Dante appeared in the doorway of the medical suite. His expression told her everything before he spoke. "Michael's dead," he said quietly. "The Calabreses took him from his house around 2. He was found in an alley in Georgetown an hour ago. Single gunshot to the head." Sarah sat down carefully, her legs suddenly unreliable. "Quick then." "Very. They didn't torture him, didn't make an example, just ended it." Dante moved closer. "I'm sorry. I know he wasn't a good husband, but he was still what? Someone I loved?" Sarah laughed, and it came out broken. "I stopped loving Michael years ago. Maybe I never really loved him at all, just loved the idea of being the kind of person who could fix a broken man. But knowing he's dead and feeling something about it are two different things. That's shock talking." "No, it's clarity." Sarah looked up at him. "I should be crying right now, should be devastated, even if we were getting divorced. But all I feel is relief, that he can't drag anyone else down with him, that it's over. Does that make me a monster?" "It makes you human." Dante sat beside her on the examination table, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "He put you through hell, Sarah. Lied to you, stole from you, endangered your life. You don't owe him grief." "Emily will think I do. When she finds out we were fighting, that I was leaving him, she'll wonder if somehow I'm responsible." "Let her wonder. It's not like you can explain the truth." The reminder stung, but it was necessary. Sarah Mitchell couldn't grieve publicly for Ava Bennett's husband because Sarah Mitchell hadn't existed when Ava was alive. This was her reality now, watching from the shadows while other people processed losses she couldn't acknowledge. "The memorial service is in 3 days," Dante said. "For you, I mean. Your coworkers are organizing it at the hospital chapel. Will you—" Sarah stopped, the request sounding absurd even in her own head. "Never mind." "Will I what?" "Will you have someone record it? Not footage from outside, but I don't know. I want to know what they say about me. Want to hear who shows up. Is that narcissistic?" "It's human," Dante repeated. "And yes, Chen can arrange it. Audio only to minimize risk." "Thank you." They sat in silence for several minutes, Sarah processing the death of the man she'd been married to while Dante simply stayed present, not trying to fix or comfort, just there. It was more than Michael had given her in years. "The Calabreses will escalate now," Dante said eventually. "They've lost millions in the last 48 hours. Lost their leverage over your husband. They'll know it's me orchestrating this, and they'll come at me hard." "How hard?" "Hard enough that this house won't be safe for much longer." He stood, offering her his hand. "I'm moving my base of operations to a more secure location. You'll come with me." Sarah took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. "Where?" "You'll see. Pack what you need. Sophia will help you. We leave at midnight." The hours until departure passed in a blur of activity. Sarah packed the few belongings she'd acquired, clothes, her new identification, medical supplies she'd been told to bring. Sophia appeared with a go-bag already prepared, containing cash, prepaid phones, and a handgun that Sarah stared at for a long moment before zipping the bag closed without touching. She wasn't ready for weapons. Not yet. At 11:30, Marco appeared at her door. "Time to move." The convoy consisted of 3 SUVs traveling in formation through streets that glistened with fresh rain. Sarah rode with Dante, Sophia in the front passenger seat, while armed men she recognized from the house filled the other vehicles. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving Seattle proper and heading into the mountains east of the city. The safe house, because that's what it was, Sarah realized, was hidden at the end of a logging road that looked barely passable. But the structure that emerged from the trees was anything but primitive. 3 stories of reinforced concrete and bulletproof glass, satellite dishes on the roof, generators humming in an outbuilding. This was a fortress disguised as a mountain retreat. "Welcome to Plan B," Dante said as they pulled into the underground garage. "We've got supplies for 6 months, enough weaponry to hold off a small army, and communication equipment that would make the Pentagon jealous. The Calabreses could bring their entire organization up here, and we'd still have the advantage." Sarah followed him inside, taking in the sophisticated security systems, the armed guards already on patrol, the command center that made the setup at his house look like a child's toy. This was serious. This was war. "How long do we stay here?" she asked. "Until it's finished, one way or another." Dante showed her to a room on the 2nd floor, larger than the guest room at his house, with windows that looked out over the forest. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, the real work begins." But Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at the window watching moonlight filter through the trees and thought about the memorial service that would happen in 3 days. Thought about Emily crying over a casket that held a stranger's body. Thought about Michael's funeral. Would anyone even attend, or had he burned all his bridges before the Calabreses burned him? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Dante stood in the doorway, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hands. "Thought you might need this," he said. Sarah took the glass, the amber liquid catching the light. "I told you I don't drink." "You also told me you didn't get into strangers' cars or fake your own death. Seems like you're full of surprises." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. Nothing. How much my life has changed in 4 days." Sarah sipped the whiskey, feeling it burn. "Monday morning, I was a nurse with a failing marriage and too much debt. Now I'm a dead woman hiding in a fortress while crime families go to war. It's surreal." Surreal becomes normal faster than you'd think. Dante's reflection in the window was pensive. "The first time I killed someone, I thought I'd never sleep again. Thought the guilt would eat me alive, but by the next week it was just another thing that had happened. The mind adapts." "How old were you?" 17. "He was trying to kill my father. I didn't have a choice." Dante's voice was matter-of-fact. "That's what I told myself anyway. That it was self-defense, protection, necessity. Maybe it was. Or maybe I was just good at justifying what needed to be done." "Do you regret it?" "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret surviving." He turned to look at her directly. "That's the difference, Sarah. Regret is for people who had better options and chose wrong. We do what we have to do with the choices we actually have." Sarah met his eyes, seeing in them a darkness that matched something newly born in herself. "Is that what we're calling this? Doing what we have to do?" "What would you call it?" "Evolution. Adaptation. Becoming something new because the old version couldn't survive." She finished her whiskey, set the glass aside. Ava Bennett would have been horrified by all of this. Would have run screaming, called the police, done everything right and proper and useless. But Sarah Mitchell, she sees the reality, understands the stakes, and she's willing to do what's necessary to stay alive. "And what's necessary in your opinion?" Sarah considered the question. What was necessary? Hiding forever, letting Dante fight her battles? Or becoming someone who could fight back, who could look the Calabreses in the eye and show them she wasn't prey anymore? "Teach me," she said suddenly, "how to shoot, how to fight, how to be something other than a victim waiting for rescue. If I'm going to be part of this world, I need to be able to defend myself in it." Dante's smile was slow and dangerous. "You're sure?" "I'm not sure about anything anymore, but I know I can't just patch up bullet wounds and hide behind armed guards forever. Eventually, the Calabreses or someone like them will get through, and when they do, I want to be ready." "All right," Dante held out his hand. "Then your education starts now." He led her down to the armory. Yes, of course this fortress had an armory, and selected a compact pistol from the extensive collection. Glock 19, standard issue for a reason. Reliable, easy to maintain, appropriate for your hand size. Sarah took the weapon, surprised by its weight. She'd never held a gun before, had actively avoided them her whole life. Now she was cradling one like it might save her life. Because it might. Dante spent the next hour teaching her the basics: how to load, how to aim, how to breathe through the recoil. They didn't fire it, too much noise, even with suppressors, but he made her practice the motions until they became muscle memory. Load, aim, squeeze, reset. Again and again until her hands stopped shaking. "You're a natural," he said finally. "Good hand-eye coordination, steady grip. With practice, you could be excellent." "I don't want to be excellent at killing people." But even as Sarah said it, she knew it was a lie, or at least a half-truth. She didn't want to be good at violence, but she also didn't want to be helpless. And in this world, those might be the same thing. "You don't have to kill anyone," Dante said, "but you need to be capable of it. There's a difference between being willing to use violence and being excited about it." "Which one are you?" "Willing, always willing, never excited." He took the gun from her, secured it back in its case. "Violence is a tool, Sarah. Sometimes the only tool that works. But it's not something to enjoy. The moment you start enjoying it, you become the thing you're fighting against." They returned upstairs to find Sophia waiting with urgent news. "The Calabreses hit 3 of our operations tonight, simultaneously. They're sending a message." "Casualties?" Dante's voice went cold. "2 injured, none dead, but they've made it clear they know where our people are. They're escalating." "Good." Dante's smile was sharp as a blade. "Let them escalate. It'll make them sloppy. How many men do we have ready for the counterstrike?" 20, fully armed, just waiting on your order. "Give me an hour to plan the targets. I want maximum damage with minimum exposure. We hit them so hard they forget what winning feels like." Sophia nodded and disappeared. Dante turned to Sarah, something fierce and focused in his expression. "This is it. The war goes hot tonight. Last chance to back out, to stay here where it's safe while I handle the violence." Sarah thought about Ava Bennett, the woman who would have taken that offer, who would have hidden in the fortress while men fought battles in her name. But Ava Bennett was dead, burned beyond recognition in a car crash that had made headlines for exactly 1 news cycle before the world moved on. Sarah Mitchell was something different, something harder, something that had been forged in the fire of the last 4 days and emerged changed. "I'm not backing out," she said, "but I'm not going with you either. Not yet. I'm not ready for that." "Then what?" "I'll be here when you get back. I'll patch up whoever needs it, keep your people alive, make myself useful." She met his eyes. "And while you're out there burning the Calabrese's world down, I'll be learning, practicing, becoming someone who can stand beside you next time instead of behind you." Dante's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then he nodded, something like respect crossing his features. "Fair enough," he said. "Welcome to the war, Sarah Mitchell. Try not to lose yourself in it." He left an hour later with 20 armed men and a plan that would cripple the Calabrese family's infrastructure. Sarah watched from the command center as Chen coordinated the strikes, as surveillance feeds showed warehouses burning and rivals fleeing. She watched Dante's forces move with military precision through enemy territory, and she understood that this was her life now: violence, strategy, survival. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she'd figure out who Sarah Mitchell was supposed to be. They returned at dawn, 3 men wounded and 1 dead. Sarah had the medical suite prepared, supplies laid out with the precision of an operating room nurse who'd done this 1,000 times. She worked through the casualties methodically: Marco with a through-and-through in his thigh, another guard with a knife wound to his abdomen that had miraculously missed anything vital, and Alexi's cousin again, this time with his arm shredded by shrapnel. The dead man was someone Sarah hadn't met, young, maybe 25, with a wedding ring on his finger that she carefully removed before Sophia covered his body with a sheet. Someone would have to tell his wife. Someone would have to explain that he died in a war she probably didn't know he was fighting. 6 Calabrese locations destroyed, Dante told her while she sutured Marco's leg. His clothes were splattered with blood, not his own this time, and he looked like something carved from stone in fury. 2 of their capos dead, another in critical condition. Victor Calabrese himself barely escaped when we hit his social club. "Casualties on your side?" Sarah kept her voice clinical, professional, even though her hands were shaking slightly. One dead, three wounded. You've already seen them. Dante moved to the window, staring out at the forest growing light with morning. They hit back during the operation, ambushed one of our teams at the docks. We were lucky it wasn't worse. Sarah finished with Marco and moved to the guard with the abdominal wound. The knife had gone deep but clean, missing the intestines by what looked like sheer luck. She irrigated the wound, packed it with gauze, and started an IV antibiotic drip from the supplies Dante had stocked. "He needs a hospital," she said quietly. "Real imaging, real surgery. I've done what I can, but if there's internal bleeding I can't see, there's a doctor coming. One who doesn't ask questions." Dante turned back to her. "He'll be here within the hour. You did good work, Sarah. You kept them stable." The praise should have felt hollow, but it didn't. Sarah had kept 3 men from bleeding out, had made decisions under pressure that had saved lives. It was the same work she'd done at Seattle Grace, just with different stakes and no institutional backup. Maybe that's what had been missing all along. The sense that her choices mattered, that she wasn't just another cog in a machine too large to notice her contribution. "I need to clean up," she said, stripping off her blood-soaked gloves. "And you need rest. When was the last time you slept?" "Tuesday." Dante's smile was thin. "I'll sleep when Victor Calabrese is dead." But Chen appeared before Sarah could respond, his expression urgent. "Boss, we've got a problem. Big one." They gathered in the command center where Chen pulled up surveillance footage from outside Dante's Seattle house, the one they'd abandoned yesterday. A convoy of vehicles had surrounded it, at least 20 men moving with military precision. Leading them was a man in an expensive suit who even Sarah recognized from the photos Dante had shown her. Victor Calabrese himself. "He's hitting the empty house?" Sophia sounded incredulous. "Does he not know we evacuated?" "He knows." Dante's voice was cold. "This is theater. He's making a point." They watched as Calabrese's men stormed the house, smashing through the already damaged front door that hadn't been fully repaired since the first attack. The cameras caught everything: men ransacking rooms, destroying furniture, spray-painting threats on the walls. Then Victor himself appeared in the frame, standing in what had been Dante's study, looking directly at the camera with a smile that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Russo," he said, his voice transmitted clearly through the hidden microphone. "You've made your point. You're capable, ruthless, willing to burn my empire to ash. I respect that. But you made one mistake." He held up his phone, showing a photograph that made Sarah's breath stop. It was her. Not Ava Bennett from before, but Sarah Mitchell from 2 days ago, captured by a street camera near Dante's house. Her new face, new hair, new identity, all of it recorded and now in enemy hands. "You thought killing her would make her worthless to me," Victor continued. "But I'm not stupid, Russo. I know a staged death when I see one. Convenient accident, convenient timing, convenient body too burned to properly identify. So I did some digging, and guess what I found?" He tapped his phone and another image appeared. Sarah climbing into Marco's SUV outside what had been her house. Then another of her entering the fortress, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. "Your nurse girlfriend is alive, which means she's still valuable, which means this war isn't over. It's just getting interesting." Victor's smile widened. "You've got 48 hours to meet me, unarmed, alone, at a location I'll send you, or I start killing everyone she ever cared about, her sister in Portland, her friends from the hospital. Every single person Ava Bennett loved gets to pay for your arrogance." The feed cut out. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Emily, he's going to go after Emily. He's bluffing." But Dante didn't sound convinced. "He doesn't have the resources to—" "Yeah, he has enough." Sophia was already pulling up information on her tablet. "Emily Bennett, Portland, Oregon. Married to David Chen, 2 children. Home address is public record. If Victor wants to make an example, get them protection. Now." Dante's command was sharp. "I want eyes on that house within the hour. Armed teams ready to extract them at first sign of trouble." On it." Sophia disappeared, already making calls. Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing through possibilities that all ended in blood. Victor had found her, had tracked her through her death and resurrection, had turned her escape into a weapon against Dante. And now Emily, innocent Emily who'd never hurt anyone, was a target. This is my fault, she said quietly. I should have stayed dead. Should have never. This is Victor's fault for being a vindictive bastard who can't accept that he's losing. Dante moved to her, his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. Your sister will be protected. Victor won't touch her because he knows the moment he does, I'll rain hell on everything he's ever loved. This is a bluff to get me out in the open. You can't meet him alone. You know it's a trap. Of course it's a trap, but it's also an opportunity. Dante's smile was sharp and dangerous. He wants to draw me out? Fine. Let him think he's won. Let him prepare his ambush, gather his men, get comfortable with his perceived advantage, and then we'll show him exactly how wrong he is. Over the next 24 hours, Sarah watched Dante orchestrate the most complex operation she'd seen yet. Sophia confirmed that Emily's house was under surveillance. 4 armed guards watching from unmarked vehicles, ready to intervene at first sign of threat. Chen hacked into Victor's communications, tracking every call and message, building a complete picture of the ambush being prepared. The meeting location was a warehouse in the industrial district, abandoned for years and perfect for an execution. Victor planned to bring 30 men, all armed, all positioned to ensure Dante wouldn't leave alive. He's going to have snipers on the roof, Sophia reported, pointing to building schematics. Probably 6 men inside as a greeting party, another 20 in vehicles outside to cut off escape routes. Classic kill box. Then we don't escape. Dante studied the layout with intense focus. We bring enough firepower to turn his kill box into his tomb. You're really going through with this. Sarah had been silent for most of the planning, but now she spoke up. You're going to walk into an ambush. We're going to turn an ambush into an offensive, Dante corrected. There's a difference. Victor thinks he's hunting me. He doesn't realize he's already caught. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist there had to be another way. But she'd seen enough of this world to know that some conflicts only ended one way. Victor Calabrese had declared war, had threatened innocent people, had made it clear he wouldn't stop until Dante was dead. This wasn't about territory anymore. It was survival. I'm coming with you, Sarah said. Everyone in the command center turned to stare at her. Absolutely not. Dante's voice was firm. You're staying here where it's safe. Safe? There's no safe anymore. Sarah moved to the table, studying the warehouse layout. Victor knows I exist, knows I'm important to you. If you die in that warehouse, how long before he finds this place? How long before he comes for me anyway? That's why you'll be evacuated before the operation. Chen's already arranged transport to where? Another safe house? Another hiding place? Sarah shook her head. I'm done hiding, Dante. Victor made this personal when he threatened my sister, so I'm going to be there when you end him. You don't know how to fight. Dante's voice was gentle but unyielding. You've had one firearms lesson. Walking into a war zone would be suicide. Then I'll stay in the vehicle, provide medical support for your men. But I'm not sitting in this fortress while you risk your life to protect mine. Sarah met his eyes. You told me I could be more than just medical staff. Prove you meant it. Dante studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Then he turned to Sophia. Body armor that fits her. Radio. She stays in the armored SUV with Marco, 300 yards from the warehouse. First sign of trouble, Marco extracts her. Non-negotiable. Sophia nodded, and Sarah felt something fierce and triumphant surge through her chest. She was going to see this through to the end. The remaining hours passed in preparation. Sarah learned how to use the radio, how to read tactical hand signals, how to stay low and move quickly if extraction became necessary. Marco showed her how to operate the SUV's defensive features, bulletproof glass, run-flat tires, even a smokescreen system that seemed absurdly excessive until she remembered she was preparing for a literal war. You should be scared, Marco said as he checked her body armor. Would be smart to be scared. I am scared. Sarah's laugh was shaky. I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life running from men like Victor Calabrese. At least this way I'm choosing the danger instead of having it forced on me. Marco's expression softened. Boss chose well with you. Most people, they break under this pressure. You just get harder. I don't feel hard. I feel like I'm barely holding together. Same thing sometimes. They moved out at 11 p.m., a convoy of 6 vehicles carrying 40 armed men. Sarah rode with Marco as promised, body armor heavy on her shoulders, radio crackling with terse communications. The city looked different at night through the SUV's tinted windows, darker, more dangerous, full of shadows that could hide anything. The warehouse district was abandoned this time of night. Factories and shipping centers locked down until morning, perfect for violence that needed to stay invisible. Marco parked exactly 300 yards from the target warehouse, killing the engine and lights. "Now we wait," he said quietly. Sarah watched through binoculars as Dante's teams moved into position. They were ghosts in the darkness, professional and precise. Sophia had found an abandoned office building across from the warehouse with perfect sight lines. Their own snipers were already in place, invisible to Victor's men. At midnight exactly, Dante walked toward the warehouse alone. Sarah's heart hammered as she watched him approach the entrance, hands visible and empty. He looked vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before, stripped of weapons and protection, just a man in a dark suit walking into certain death. The warehouse doors opened. 6 men emerged, weapons raised. "Rousseau," one of them called. "You're early." "I'm punctual." Dante's voice carried clearly through the radio. He was wearing a wire, broadcasting everything. "Where's Victor?" "Inside. He wants to talk first." "How civilized." Dante disappeared into the warehouse and Sarah stopped breathing. This was it. The moment where everything either worked perfectly or collapsed into catastrophe. "Teams in position," Sophia's voice came through the radio. "Snipers have targets acquired. On your mark, boss." Inside the warehouse, Sarah could hear the conversation through Dante's wire. "You came alone." Victor's voice was smooth, pleased with himself. "I'm impressed. I thought you'd try something clever." "Well, I'm always clever, Victor. That's why I'm winning." "Winning?" Victor laughed. "You're surrounded by 30 of my best men. My snipers have you in their crosshairs. You walk out of here in a body bag and this war is over. How is that winning?" "Because you made a crucial mistake." Dante's voice was calm, almost amused. "You assumed I was the only one who knew how to set a trap." The explosion came first. Sarah watched through the binoculars as the warehouse's east wall erupted in fire and smoke. The charges Chen had planted during reconnaissance detonating perfectly. Victor's snipers on the roof were thrown clear and the men inside scattered in chaos. Then Dante's teams moved. It was beautiful in its brutality. Coordinated fire from 3 directions, snipers taking out Victor's exterior guards before they could respond, assault teams breaching through the smoke to secure the interior. Sarah watched it unfold like a dance choreographed by death itself. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. When the smoke cleared, 20 of Victor's men were down. The rest had fled, abandoning their boss to save themselves. And Victor Calabrese himself was on his knees in the center of the warehouse, Dante's gun pressed against his temple. "You wanted to meet alone," Dante said, his voice transmitted clearly through the wire. "Here we are." "You can't kill me." Victor's confidence was cracking. "I've got people in place. Kill me and they'll do nothing. Your organization is finished, Victor. I've seized your assets, turned your lieutenants, destroyed your infrastructure. You're not a crime boss anymore. You're just an old man who made the mistake of threatening someone I care about." Sarah's breath caught at those words. Someone I care about. "The nurse." Victor spat blood. "This is all about that worthless—" The gunshot cut him off. Sarah flinched at the sound, even expecting it. Through the binoculars, she saw Victor Calabrese slump sideways, dead before he hit the ground. Dante stood over him for a moment, then turned and walked out of the warehouse like he was leaving a business meeting. "It's done," Sophia's voice came through the radio. "All hostile targets neutralized. We're clear." The teams moved with practiced efficiency, sanitizing the scene, removing evidence, making it look like a gang dispute that would be filed away and forgotten by overworked detectives. By the time Dante reached the SUV where Sarah waited, it was as if the battle had never happened, except for the blood on his suit and the darkness in his eyes. "Are you hurt?" Sarah asked as he climbed into the vehicle. "No." Dante's voice was flat, emotionless. "Marco, take us home." They drove back to the fortress in silence. Sarah wanted to ask if he was okay, wanted to say something comforting or profound, but the words wouldn't come. What did you say to someone who just executed a man in cold blood? What comfort could she offer that wouldn't sound hollow? It wasn't until they were back in the fortress, until Dante had showered and changed and emerged, looking almost human again, that Sarah found her voice. "You called me someone you care about," she said quietly. They were alone in his study, the rest of the team debriefing downstairs. "Did you mean it, or was it just for Victor's benefit?" Dante poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one without asking if she wanted it. "I don't say things I don't mean, not about that. I've been here less than a week. Time doesn't matter, not in this life." He sank into his chair, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. "You could have run a dozen times, could have turned me in, could have taken the money I offered and disappeared. But you stayed. You adapted. You became something new instead of breaking. How could I not care about someone like that?" Sarah sipped her whiskey, processing his words. "I killed my husband." "Victor killed your husband. I gave you the information that led to his death. I made the choice to let it happen instead of warning him." The confession came out barely above a whisper. "Does that make me a monster?" "It makes you a survivor." Dante set down his glass and moved to kneel in front of her chair, his hands taking hers. "Michael put you in impossible circumstances. He endangered your life, destroyed your future, dragged you into a war you never asked for. You didn't kill him. You just stopped trying to save him. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because I don't feel different from you right now. You killed Victor with a gun. I killed Michael by staying silent. Both of them are dead because of choices we made." "Then maybe we're both monsters." Dante's smile was slight but genuine. "Or maybe we're just people doing what we have to do to survive in a world that doesn't offer better options. I don't know which. But I know I don't regret Victor's death, and I don't think you should regret Michael's." Sarah thought about her husband, former husband, dead husband, and tried to summon guilt or grief or anything other than the cold relief she felt knowing he couldn't hurt anyone else. She came up empty. "I listened to my memorial service," she said instead. "Chen sent me the audio like you promised. 200 people showed up. They said beautiful things about me, about how dedicated I was, how kind, how I always put others first." Her laugh was bitter. "They were mourning a person who never really existed. The Ava Bennett they described was a performance I gave because I thought that's what I was supposed to be." "And who's Sarah Mitchell supposed to be?" It was the question Sarah had been avoiding for days. Who was she now, stripped of her old identity, freed from her old obligations? Who did she want to become in this dangerous new world? "Stronger," she said finally. "Smarter. Someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space or making hard choices. Someone who stands beside you instead of behind you." "Beside me as what?" Dante's voice was careful, but his eyes held something intense. "As an employee? An ally? Something more?" Sarah's heart hammered. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. She could keep things professional, maintain boundaries, stay safe in the comfortable distance of a working relationship. Or she could acknowledge what had been building between them since that first night in the rain when she'd climbed into his car and changed everything. "Something more," she said quietly. "If you want that." Dante's answer was to pull her down from the chair and kiss her with an intensity that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle or tentative, it was claiming, possessive, full of all the violence and passion that defined who he was. And Sarah kissed him back with equal fervor, channeling every emotion of the last week into the press of her mouth against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he said. "Everything about us is already complicated." Sarah's laugh was shaky. "What's one more complication?" "You're right." He stood, pulling her up with him. "But there are still things we need to handle. Your sister, for one. We need to tell her you're alive." "What? No." Sarah pulled back. "We can't. If she knows I'm alive, she'll tell people. The whole carefully constructed death falls apart. The Calabrese family is finished. Victor's dead. His organization scattered. The threat is neutralized." Dante moved to his computer, pulling up files. "Your sister deserves to know you're alive. She's been grieving for 5 days. That's cruel. And telling her I'm alive but can never see her again isn't cruel? It's honest, which is more than she's getting now." Dante turned to face her. "I'm not saying you walk up to her door and surprise her, but a phone call, a video message. Something so she knows you're alive and safe, even if you can't be part of her life anymore. Sarah thought about Emily crying over her death, about her niece and nephew growing up thinking Aunt Ava was gone forever. The thought was physically painful. "Okay," she said, "but not yet. Give me time to figure out what to say." "You have a week. After that, I'm making the call for you." Dante's tone left no room for argument. "I've done a lot of morally questionable things, Sarah, but letting your sister grieve unnecessarily isn't going to be one of them." The week passed in a strange kind of domestic normalcy. Dante's organization absorbed what remained of the Calabrese operations, consolidating power with ruthless efficiency. Sarah continued her work in the medical suite, treating the occasional injury and learning more about the empire Dante had built. She also spent hours crafting what she'd say to Emily, writing and rewriting until the words felt right. On the 7th day, Sarah made the call. Emily answered on the first ring, her voice hoarse from crying. "Hello? Em, it's me. It's Ava." The silence on the other end lasted so long Sarah thought the connection had dropped. Then Emily's voice came through, raw with emotion. "That's not funny. Whoever this is, it's sick, and it's really me." Sarah's voice cracked. "I know what this sounds like, but I need you to listen. The accident, it wasn't real. I'm alive. I can't explain everything, but I need you to know I'm okay." "Ava?" Emily's whisper was barely audible. "Oh my, this isn't... How?" "I was in danger. People were after me because of Michael's debts. The only way to protect everyone was to disappear, to make them think I was dead." The explanation sounded absurd even to Sarah's own ears. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but it was the only way. Where are you? Are you safe? Can I see you?" "I'm safe. But no, you can't see me. Not for a long time, maybe never. I have a new identity now, a new life. But I couldn't let you keep thinking I was dead. You deserve to know the truth." Emily was crying now, great heaving sobs that broke Sarah's heart. "I don't understand. I buried you. We had a service. I told the kids you were with the angels. What am I supposed to do with this?" "You live your life. You take care of your family. And you know that somewhere I'm alive and thinking about you." Sarah wiped at her own tears. "I love you, Em. I love your kids. That never changes, even if I can't be there." "Can I call you? This number?" "No, this phone will be destroyed after we hang up. I can't leave any trails." Sarah took a shaky breath. "But I'll contact you again when it's safe. I promise. Until then, you have to let everyone keep thinking I'm dead." "Can you do that?" "I don't know if I can live with this secret." "You can. You're stronger than you think." Sarah glanced at Dante, who was watching from across the room with an expression of quiet support. "And you're not alone. You have David, the kids, your whole life. Don't let my mess ruin that." They talked for another 20 minutes, Emily asking questions Sarah couldn't fully answer, both of them crying through most of it. Finally, reluctantly, Sarah said goodbye and ended the call. Dante took the phone, removed the battery, and destroyed both pieces. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Did I? I just transferred my pain to her. Now she has to carry this secret forever. She has closure. That's more than most people get." Dante pulled her close, and Sarah let herself sink into his warmth. "And someday, when enough time has passed, maybe you can see her again. Stranger things have happened." 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in what had become her room in the fortress. Their room, really, since Dante spent most nights there now, and studied her reflection. She'd cut her hair shorter, dyed it a shade darker, had learned to handle a gun with deadly competence, to think strategically, to read people the way Dante did. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Ava Bennett would have been horrified by what Sarah Mitchell had become. But Ava Bennett was dead, mourned and buried, existing only in memory and old photographs. Sarah Mitchell was alive, powerful, standing at the right hand of the most dangerous man in Seattle. "Ready?" Dante appeared in the doorway, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Ava's monthly salary used to be. "Ready." Sarah adjusted her own outfit. Designer dress, expensive heels, the kind of power wardrobe she'd never imagined owning. Is it strange that I'm nervous about a business dinner? It's your first official appearance as my partner. Nervous is appropriate. Dante crossed to her, adjusting her necklace with gentle fingers. But you'll be perfect. You always are. The dinner was with the heads of 3 other criminal organizations, establishing new territorial agreements now that the Calabrese family was gone. Sarah sat beside Dante through hours of negotiation, watching him work with the same precision she'd once applied to patient care. She even contributed once, pointing out a flaw in a proposed money laundering scheme that would have left them vulnerable to federal investigation. The other crime bosses had looked at her with new respect after that. "You're a natural at this," one of them said as the evening wound down. "How long have you been in the life?" "Long enough," Sarah replied with a smile that gave away nothing. On the drive back to the fortress, Dante took her hand. "You were brilliant tonight. Did you see Romano's face when you caught that accounting error? I thought he was going to propose marriage." "I only want one proposal," Sarah said, then immediately regretted it. Too forward, too soon, too... "Good." Dante's smile was warm. "Because I've been planning one for weeks, just waiting for the right moment." Sarah's heart stopped. "Are you serious?" "Completely." He pulled the SUV over to the side of the road, turning to face her fully. "I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but in this life, time moves differently. And I know that I want you beside me for whatever comes next. As my partner, my equal, my wife." He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple platinum with a single diamond that caught the moonlight. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the ring, at this man who'd saved her life and changed it irrevocably, at the future stretching out before them full of danger and power and possibility. She thought about Ava Bennett and the half-life she'd endured, always putting everyone else first, always sacrificing herself for people who didn't appreciate it. That woman was dead. And in her place was someone who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. "Yes," Sarah said. "Yes, I'll marry you." 6 months after that, Sarah Mitchell married Dante Russo in a private ceremony attended by the core members of his organization. Sophia was her maid of honor. Marco gave her away. Chen recorded everything on video that would never be shared but would serve as proof that this impossible life was real. And as Sarah stood beside Dante, speaking vows that promised forever in a world where forever was never guaranteed, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt happy. A year after her death, Sarah had carved out a life that belonged entirely to her. She ran the medical operations for Dante's organization with ruthless efficiency, had learned to negotiate with criminals and politicians with equal skill, could handle weapons and strategy and violence when necessary. But she'd also built something softer. She called Emily once a month from burner phones, maintaining the connection even if they could never meet. She'd started a scholarship fund for children of fallen soldiers, legitimate, legal, something good born from the money she helped Dante earn through less legitimate means. And she'd found love with a man who saw her as an equal, who valued her mind as much as her loyalty, who'd given her the freedom to become whoever she wanted to be. 2 years after faking her death, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. "We're having a baby," she told Dante, watching his face cycle through shock and joy and fierce protectiveness in rapid succession. "A baby." He placed his hand over her still flat stomach, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes for the first time ever. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But yes, incredibly happy." Their daughter was born on a spring morning, perfect and healthy, and screaming with the kind of fury that made Dante laugh through his own tears. They named her Sophia Elena Russo, and Sarah held her and thought about the life this child would have. She'd grow up protected, powerful, taught to be strong and smart and capable. She'd never know the half-life Sarah had endured, never suffer at the hands of men who saw her as less than. Dante would make sure of it. Sarah would make sure of it. "She's beautiful," Dante whispered, his finger grasped in Sophia's tiny fist. "She's perfect. She's ours." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in that new baby smell. "And we're going to give her the world." 3 years after her death, Sarah Mitchell, formerly Ava Bennett, stood on the balcony of the fortress that had become home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Behind her, she could hear Dante playing with Sophia, their daughter's laughter bright as bells. She thought about the woman she'd been, stranded in the rain and convinced her life was over. Thought about the desperate choices and dangerous alliances and all the ways she'd broken every rule she'd once believed in. And she didn't regret a single moment. Because the truth was, Ava Bennett had died that night outside Seattle Grace Medical Center. Had died when she climbed into a stranger's car and decided survival mattered more than safety. Everything since then had been a rebirth, a transformation from victim to victor. Sarah Mitchell wasn't a nurse anymore, wasn't a dutiful wife or a self-sacrificing martyr. She was a queen in an empire built on violence and strategy, a mother raising a daughter to be fierce and fearless, a woman who'd burned her old life to ash and risen from the flames as something entirely new. The past was dead, buried and mourned and forgotten. But the future was hers to write, and she was just getting started.